Did you know there's a place on Earth where you can't drive from North America to South America? It's called the Darien Gap, and it's the only break in the world's longest road system. The reasons behind this 160-kilometre stretch of undeveloped land are multifaceted and intriguing. Environmental factors, the rights of indigenous peoples, and complex geopolitical relationships all play a role in why this gap remains uncrossed by road. As we explore the Darien Gap, we'll uncover the fascinating story behind this unique geographical feature and why it continues to resist development in our interconnected world. The impenetrable fortress of nature. Imagine being on the end of a huge wild area that has been untouched by people for hundreds of years. This is the Darien Gap, which is the only break in the Pan-American Highway. It is made up of dense jungle and dangerous swamps. Looking into this natural fortress that can't be broken into, you'll see a landscape that seems to refuse to be changed by people. The Darien Gap has strong natural barriers because of the way it is shaped. There is a lot of dense tropical rainforest. The canopy of tall trees is so thick that sunlight barely reaches the forest floor. It's hard to move around on the ground because of all the vines, roots, and other plants that are growing there. Large swamps and marshes make things even harder. This wild area is very different from how people have always wanted to connect and explore, showing how powerful and complicated nature is. There are thousands of plant and animal species in the Gap's unique ecosystem, and many of them can't be found anywhere else on Earth. Trying to cross or develop the area is made more difficult by the wide range of life that lives there. People who want to cross the Darien Gap on foot will face many difficult obstacles. It usually takes between 5 and 10 days, but it depends on the route and the weather. Travellers have to deal with poisonous snakes, insects that carry diseases, and the constant risk of getting lost in the huge unmarked wilderness. The humid weather and rough terrain make moving slowly and tiring, and every step could hurt you or make things worse. When we look at this wild area that hasn't been tamed, it's only natural to wonder why we haven't been able to do so in this age of amazing technology. There is a complicated web of factors at play that goes beyond the strong natural barriers that have stopped many attempts to bridge this last gap in the Pan-American Highway. A history of failed ambitions. There is still a 100-mile gap in the Pan-American Highway that has stopped development for decades, even though there is a lot of economic and political pressure to close it. This hole, called the Darien Gap, has always made it impossible to build the dream highway system that would connect all of the Americas. In the 1970s, the US backed a project to build a road through the gap because it could be good for business and make travel easier. But environmentalists who were worried about doing irreparable harm to the area's unique ecosystems and biodiversity were very against this plan. During the 1990s, there were again talks about building a road through the Darien Gap. However, the United Nations strongly opposed these plans. The United Nations was against it because it could hurt the environment, especially 2 national parks in the Gap that are on the UNESCO World Heritage List. This pushback from other countries showed that the Gap's ecological importance is becoming more widely known around the world. Indigenous groups in the area, like the Kuna and Embera Wunan, have also been very important in stopping the building of the roads. People in these communities are very worried about keeping their unique cultural heritage alive and keeping their ancestral lands safe from outside development and influence. Their opposition makes the problem more complicated because it puts economic progress against the rights and traditions of native people. Concerns about the environment, the rights of native people, and the area's bad reputation all make it impossible to build a road through the Darien Gap. Each attempt has been hampered by a mix of these problems, which makes it less likely that a road will be built soon. When we think about this area's future, it's clear that nature isn't the only thing that's stopping progress. The human factor, including our growing awareness of the environment, our respect for indigenous rights, and complicated geopolitical concerns, also plays a big part in keeping the Darien Gap wild and unconquered. Guardians of the Gap, indigenous tribes, and environmental concerns. The Darien Gap's native tribes, especially the Kuna and Embera Wunan, have lived in this area for hundreds of years and have a deep connection to the land that affects every part of their lives. Outsiders find these communities' environments hostile and impossible to get through. To survive, they've created unique cultural practices that show who they are and how they relate to nature. The Kuna are known for their matriarchal system, which means that women make most of the decisions in their communities. The Embere-Wunan follow traditions that may seem strange to people from other places, like wearing traditional clothes and getting very detailed tattoos on their bodies. Both tribes have strict rules about marriage, which has led to some interesting genetic results, such as the fact that there are a lot of albinos in the Kuna community. These native groups have learned a lot about the Gap's ecosystem by passing on information about plants, animals, and waterways from one generation to the next. Because they are so close to nature, they are in a way responsible for protecting the Darien Gap's wildlife. The delicate balance of this unique environment depends on their traditional ways of doing things and the knowledge they hold. But modernisation and development efforts are putting more and more pressure on the tribe's way of life. They see outside interference as a threat to their independence and the ecosystem they've been protecting for hundreds of years. This stance has led to a complicated situation of fighting back and negotiating with the government and development agencies. It's clear that any conservation efforts in this area must include the voices of these native communities as we think about its future. Their ancestral knowledge and role as land guardians give them important information about how to live in a way that doesn't harm the environment. This information could help larger efforts to protect the environment. Finding a balance between protecting their way of life and dealing with the stresses of a world that is changing quickly is hard. This is especially true for making sure that the Darien Gap's unique ecosystem stays safe. The dark side of isolation, smuggling, and geopolitical tensions. The Darien Gap's extreme isolation and impenetrable wilderness have made it an attractive corridor for illegal activities, particularly smuggling and drug trafficking. This remote region, spanning the border between Panama and Colombia, provides perfect cover for illicit operations due to its lack of infrastructure and minimal law enforcement presence. Drug traffickers exploit the Gap's rugged landscape and dense jungle to transport narcotics, taking advantage of the area's unique geographical challenges. The absence of roads and limited surveillance capabilities make it nearly impossible for authorities to effectively monitor and control the flow of illegal goods through this region. The Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, FARC, have established a significant presence in the area, further complicating law enforcement efforts. Their involvement not only facilitates drug trafficking, but also increases risks for migrants attempting to cross the gap. The combination of natural hazards and criminal elements creates a treacherous environment that smugglers readily exploit. Quantifying the scale of illegal activities in the Darien Gap is challenging due to its inaccessibility. However, the impact on both Panama and Colombia is substantial, straining resources and international relations. The inability to effectively control this area creates tensions between neighbouring countries and complicates efforts to combat transnational crime. The geopolitical implications of the Darien Gap's status as a smuggler's paradise extend beyond the immediate region. It affects the relationship between Panama and Colombia and influences broader regional security concerns. The situation poses a complex challenge for policymakers: how to address security issues without compromising the ecological and cultural integrity of this unique area. Addressing these concerns requires a delicate balance between preserving one of the last truly wild places on Earth and tackling the very real threats enabled by its isolation. Any solution must consider the environmental impact, indigenous rights, and the need for effective law enforcement in this challenging terrain. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We will catch you in the next one.